Hey, it's Jared. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 10 things you need to do when you set up a new camera or a camera that's new to you. Now, I have the Sony a7 IV here, and whether or not you are on this camera or on a different camera, these settings are universal. These are things that you need to do regardless of the camera that you're on. Now, if you have a Sony a7 IV or a Canon R6, and there's this other small handful of cameras that I've produced these fast start guides for, you're going to want to check those out down in the description below. They're fantastic courses that get you up and running and really mastering your camera so that you can get the best photos possible out of it. And then I also have the Ditch Auto course, which helps you get out of automatic mode and start shooting in manual mode. That's a free course, so definitely make sure to check that one and take advantage of it. So the first thing that I do when I get a new camera, of course I power it on, but a lot of times when we turn our camera on for the first time, we get excited and we just go through those menus super fast. Now, the first thing, of course, that I do is go and change the date and time. I think this is super important, and sometimes people overlook this because date and time doesn't sound too exciting. Why would I need to set the date and time on my camera? Well, it's because this information is going to be written to the file on your camera, and that file that you upload to whatever service is going to be listed by date. So if I'm utilizing Adobe Lightroom, or I'm just uploading my photo to Google Photos or something like that, that photo is being listed in there by date and time. And I want to make sure that that information that's written to the file is correct. So I set my date and time. I'll go into my area setting and set the time zone. I will go into daylight savings and set that on or off. I'll go to the date and time and make sure that all of that is correct. Setting all of this is a good practice for your camera. Now, the next thing I do is I format the SD card internally inside of the camera. Now, you of course can empty the trash and delete the items off of your card from your computer, but I highly recommend going in and formatting the card within your camera, even if it's a brand new card, because your camera has some formatting methods that it utilizes that's going to be specific to the type of camera. Even though it's pretty much the same formatting method at the top level, there's little databases and things that it's going to install, a couple of different folders, depending on what camera you have. And it's best just to let the camera do the formatting. Now, the camera is going to be writing a lot of files to this card as you take pictures and all of that stuff. And you definitely don't want to leave that up to chance, because a ill-formatted card, an improperly formatted card, could lead to image file corruption, and you definitely don't want that. Your best chance at fighting image file corruption is to format your card inside the camera. Now, the next setting that I change is the image quality that I'm going to be capturing. So I'll go into image quality and we'll scroll down here. You can see there's, on this particular camera, there's JPEG and HEIF. JPEG is a standard image format you're probably familiar with. HEIF is a high efficiency image file, and you can see there are two different options on this particular camera. It might be a little confusing. What's the difference between 422 and 420? 422 is going to be a higher quality image because it contains more color information than 420. So I would recommend, if you're going to use HEIF, shoot 422 rather than 420. But JPEG is going to be the most flexible for you. Most computers and operating systems, whether you're on a Mac or a PC, are going to work with HEIF images now, but if you're on a little bit older of a system, you might want to avoid using HEIF until you're fully upgraded to, say, Windows 11 or the latest version of Mac OS, just to make sure, because these images are not as compatible yet as JPEG, which of course has been around forever. So that's why I choose JPEG even at this point, even though most of my devices are fully up-to-date devices. I then go down into image quality settings, where I can choose my file format. Now, if I wanted that JPEG or that HEIF, I would need to choose this option here, or choose RAW and JPEG, or just RAW. I used to always shoot RAW plus JPEG because I wanted the RAW image, which is a higher quality image, which makes it easier for editing, changing things like exposure and your color balance and all that good stuff. There's much more information in a RAW file than there is a JPEG file which has been compressed. So I would shoot RAW plus JPEG because the JPEGs would be my backup. If something happened to my RAW image, which sometimes would happen, I might have like one RAW image out of 1,000 that was corrupt or there was an issue with, at least I also had the JPEG as a backup. I just haven't had any issues like that in so long since I've been shooting Sony, and even with Canon when I was shooting Canon, towards the end there when I was shooting on the 5D Mark III and the 5D Mark IV, wasn't having any issues with file corruption, and so I just started shooting RAW only. RAW and JPEG definitely is going to take up more storage because you're shooting both a RAW image and a JPEG to the same card, unless you have a camera like this one that has dual cards in which you can shoot RAW images to one card and JPEG images to another. But that's a little advanced. For the purposes of this video, I would choose one or the other, either RAW or JPEG. Now, I also on this camera have RAW image type sizes, and so I can go with a low, medium, or large, a uncompressed or a compressed RAW file, and so a lot of times I just go with lossless large. I don't necessarily go all the way up to uncompressed unless I'm shooting stuff that's high detail. So in setting your image size, it really is kind of a personal preference based on what you're going to be doing with your images. If you're going to be shooting something where you need fine detail, I would go uncompressed, large image size as possible so that you get the most resolution and clarity that you can. If you're going to be shooting things that are less detail, landscapes and stuff like that, where there's a lot going on in the image, but it's all fairly far away, the detail is going to be good enough and you could probably go down to compressed. The differences between large, medium, and small, these are resolution sizes, and so it would change the overall resolution of your image, giving you a smaller resolution image, which could be fine, especially if you have a higher megapixel camera and whatever you're shooting, you don't need that full resolution. You can get a smaller resolution, which is going to result in smaller file sizes. A very important feature is making sure that you turn on copyright information as that information is written to each and every file that you capture. So when you take an image, not only is your camera writing the details to the image of, the exposure settings and all of that stuff, it's also going to write your photographer information. And so come in here and set this up. On some cameras, you can actually utilize the touchscreen and you can set the photographer's name. And so I will go and tap in my name and hit OK. And OK to confirm, and then set copyright, and I will type in all rights reserved. And so that way there is a copyright on these images that say that this image is not able to be used for anything. If something happened to your camera, it got stolen, and those images got uploaded somehow, there'd be a copyright applied to those images. And of course, people can ignore the copyright or flat out delete it using something like Photoshop, but having that information in there is good. I write it to every single image. And there have been instances where I found images that I shared on social media or on my own blog that ended up on other websites, and I was able to download the image off of their site and see my copyright right from the image file that they stole and used on their website. So I find it really important to set a copyright on your image and then make sure you display the copyright here so that you can see and make sure that it looks okay, that you spelled everything correctly, and then add that here. Of course, you can add additional copyright information with your file editor, your image editor, like Adobe Lightroom, Adobe Photoshop. They both have the ability to add additional information beyond the simple information that we added here inside the camera. Now, most cameras are Bluetooth and or Wi-Fi enabled, which means you can connect them to your phone and utilize the app provided by the camera manufacturer to do a lot of cool things. A couple of things that I like to set up on my camera is connecting it to my phone. As you can see here, I'll do my best to show what's going on. You can see that my camera and my phone are connected, and I can go into setup and I can turn on location linkage, which is going to make sure that as long as my phone and my camera are connected and are close together, when I'm shooting photos, it's actually going to write GPS data that my phone grabs to that image file, which is fantastic. As a web designer, I like to use images on my clients' websites that have geolocated images or geotagged images, which is good for SEO purposes. But I just like it because then if I'm utilizing any of those tools that can show photos on a map, it has the GPS data. And also a cool feature is being able to auto adjust your time and date based on what your phone has. I can also go through some of these other settings and change them. And then I can also view and import photos that are saved on the camera. Another feature is being able to use remote shooting, which means if my camera was like on a tripod or mounted somewhere, I can connect to my camera from my phone and wirelessly trigger my camera, including making changes to the shooting settings and all of that from my phone. It's an absolutely fantastic feature that I love utilizing. So whether I'm connected Bluetooth and of course it utilizes Wi-Fi as well to do the remote shooting and also the image file transfer, it's great to have that ability. And the Imaging Edge app on the Sony is a great app. Canon, Nikon, Fuji, they all have their own apps that allow you to basically do the same exact thing for that particular platform. Now, most of these cameras allow you to make changes to the button orientation and adjust the buttons on the camera based on what you want them to do, which is fantastic. I only change a few things on my camera, especially on the Sony. You typically have to push over to the right and then rotate the dial in order to change your ISO. I like having quicker access and not having to do that, so I will often go into my custom key settings and make changes, or even just go into the My Dial, which is a much faster way of utilizing that for your different custom settings. But I'll go into the shooting option here and then rotate around to the appropriate setting. 4 is the back, and I set that to ISO. And so that way I don't have to press to the right and then rotate the dial to adjust the ISO. I just have to rotate the dial and that's it. Most of these buttons are customizable. And so if there's a button that's programmed to something that you don't use, you can change it to something else that makes more sense. And every camera is different with different button layouts and different options. And so it's fun to kind of play around and see what makes the most sense and getting into those menu items faster by pressing that button instead of having to hit menu and go through the entire menu to find where that setting is. This is a much faster setup and absolutely something that you should customize based on your own needs. Now, once I'm ready to start shooting, I definitely go into manual mode. I shoot in manual mode all the time. It's very rare that I ever dip into shutter priority or aperture priority, and there's really never an instance for me to go into automatic mode unless I'm handing my camera to someone and they don't know how to use a camera. But automatic mode, I try to get out of that because with manual mode, I'm able to get the creative look that I'm going for out of my image and not relying on the camera to try and do its best to get the right exposure. So if you want to learn more about how to shoot in manual, I mentioned at the beginning my Ditch Auto course. It's linked down below. It's a free course and it's going to teach you everything that there is to know about shooting in manual mode. So definitely go and sign up for that course. Now, all cameras, whether DSLR or mirrorless, have a drive mode. And on this particular camera, I can go into a couple of different drive modes. So if I go into this drive mode, I have single shooting, I've got continuous, I've got self timers, I've got bracketed shooting, all sorts of different options here. Most of the time I'm going to be shooting in single shooting mode, but there's a lot of different options as well in drive mode with continuous. High plus is extremely fast shooting, and then there's high, mid, and low. A lot of cameras these days have multiple speeds in which you can shoot continuous. Just because you can shoot fast and high speed continuous doesn't necessarily mean that you need to. And so most of the time I have mine set to high and not high plus because I want to shoot continuous and I want fast, but I don't want so fast that I'm getting as many images that this camera is able to kick out. So I usually leave it set to this mode, and then I'll go into my focus mode. And on this particular camera, I like shooting in continual autofocus mode because as I'm switching between photo and video, continuous AF makes the most sense, but automatic AF is also a good option. The only time I will go into single shot AF is if I'm shooting portraits and I want to make sure that the camera doesn't continuously search for focus. But on lenses like this particular lens that has a focus lock button on the side of it, I can tell the camera by holding down this button not to do any form of autofocus, and I rely on that quite a bit. Like when I'm shooting weddings and stuff like that, and I want to make sure that the camera is locked off with its focus. So the last thing that I will do is go and change my focus area, and I will change it from the typical wide, which means it's going to utilize a good portion, if not all of the sensor, and I'll go down to the spot focus area, which I could then move around. I like forcing the camera to a specific little area and not letting it search around and try and look for things and accidentally landing on somebody in the background when I wanted the foreground. And so as long as I put this little box over somebody and it's locked onto them, and then I can even tap to do focus tracking in some situations, obviously not when the camera's pointing at the table, then I make sure that I am getting the shot that I want and that I'm not getting something else that was in the background that happened to be moving and the camera decided it wanted to focus on that. So utilizing that small point definitely makes things better for me. That's going to do it for this video. I hope that you learned a couple of things on how to better set up your camera. I've got courses, as I explained, down below. Some of these courses walk you through everything specific to the camera that you're utilizing, so make sure to check those out. And you definitely got to take the Ditch Auto course. It has a lot of great stuff in it. It's going to help you get out of automatic mode and learn how to capture the images that you know your camera is capable of capturing. That's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, use the comment box down below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. That's going to do it for today. Hope to see you back in another one soon. Take care.